Welcome to Coffee Theology's Language 101 video series. This video is going to be on Latin pronunciation. How do you correctly say those letters in Latin so that you are correctly saying the words correctly? Well, it may not seem that important to have good pronunciation for a dead language. Who you're going to talk to that's even going to know that you're mispronouncing it. But having good pronunciation, especially the original Roman pronunciation, will actually help you understand a little bit better why the language makes some of the changes that it does, why some of the word forms form the way they do. And in doing so, that might make things a little bit easier in learning the language as a whole. Plus, if you have good pronunciation, you sound a little bit more like Caesar did when he was talking, and that just sounds cool. Kinda. Maybe not, but we'll see. We'll see. The point is, pronunciation is important, so this is an important video, and you should make sure that you watch it and like it whether you like it or not. So what is it that we have here with pronunciation? Well, first you have the vowels. Now, with vowels, as we look at this, in English, we have long vowels and short vowels. And what we mean by that is a long A says A and a short A says ah, which is actually two different sounds. But what you see here with the Latin vowels is the long A is literally long and the short A is just literally the same sound shorter. So the Latin A was with the long A, with the macron, it's going to be ah, it's like father. And then the short A is ah, actually ah, as in facility. So it's ah. So long and short isn't a change in sound. It is instead literally long and short. And the same thing is true of each of these vowels. So the E with the macron says A, like they. The E without it says A. So they get. Now, we say get, and you say but it's A. So A. So A. The I says the E sound, like machine, as you see here. And so the long is E, and the short is E. So it's not really I, it's E, feet. So E, machine, and feet. And then O, as in no, and O, as in obey. And then oo as in rule, and then oo as in put. So what you're going to see is that it actually is long and short. Just literally, you're going to say the sound longer if it's a long vowel. Now that helps because as you start to learn the pronunciation and so on and so forth, you'll find that the saying it long or saying it short is almost indistinguishable, and it's hard to even tell the difference between them, and it may not seem that it's that important, but there are definite ways in which saying it longer can mean it's a different form. And so if you were speaking out loud, you would want to make sure that that was clear so you had the correct form. Now, that's the 5 vowels that are there, but you may be wondering, why were there no sounds like for instance, I, the long I sound? Where is that sound? Well, that sound is made by diphthongs. Now, as much as it'd be fun to call your brother or sister a diphthong, or your roommate or your spouse, and say, you diphthong, and just get away with it because it's not really a bad word, and it does sound pretty cool, I still don't recommend it because it still just kind of comes off wrong when you call people a diphthong. But a diphthong actually means you're taking 2 sounds and you are putting them together so closely they become one sound. So what we have then in Latin is these diphthongs right here. So you have they have the Continental and Ecclesiastical. You have the AE and the OE and the AU as the only diphthongs. Now, first you're wondering, well, what is the Continental versus the Classical? Well, when a language moves from its home country and gets spoken elsewhere broadly, the other languages start to impact that language and how things are pronounced. That is why people have different accents. And when Latin moved its way into the continent or got processed more further into the church throughout Europe, which is less the continental or the ecclesiastical, as it moved into those areas, the pronunciation of certain diphthongs here and then also consonants changed and shifted. Just as you get to Europe, northeastern Europe, and it's very, very well, and you get a lot of I do horrible accents. I'm sorry, but the V in the W, they get mixed up and such like that. And so similarly, when Latin made it up into that area, sounds were kind of added in and things were pronounced differently. And so once you see that and you grasp that, you realize, okay, the Continental Ecclesiastical Latin is actually the mispronounced saying Latin with an accent type of pronunciation. That is why I push for doing the Roman or the classical pronunciation. Now, with the Roman or classical pronunciation, it also, as I said, will show you some of why the words change, and it is in that way a little more helpful to learn the Roman and stick with the Roman or classical pronunciation. Now, when doing that, then you see that the A and the E in the Roman or classical are what say the I sound. Now, like, how can I remember that? Well, the great thing about a diphthong, and if you've done the correct pronunciation of the vowels on their own, is that this is a very natural combination. So what you see here is the A says ah, and the E says a. So you say ah, a. So you take those two sounds and you get them closer together. Ah, a. Then closer. I. So the two sounds blended into one. I. That is a diphthong of A and E. The E and the I, you will see, is much similar, where it says A and E. A for the E sound, E for the I sound, and you put those together, A. And that's where you get the long A sound from the English long A coming in with the E and the I in Latin. And then you have the O and the E, O, A, and you put those together, oi, as in foil. The E and the U, as in U in eulogy, and then A and the U, ow, as in out, and then the U and the I, we. And so these are all combined into one sound. So it's I, A, oi, you, ow, and we. That is how those combined sounds then are pronounced correctly. You'll learn those as you go along, and it's going to be a lot easier than you think once you get used to them, and then you're going to have really good Latin pronunciation of the vowels. Often the vowels can be where the accent would seem to come, like in the Midwest. If you have the like I grew up in Michigan, and you say you're going to the I'm not going to be able to think of anything from Michigan. Just when you want to think of something from Michigan, you can't think of it. It's just, forget it. So then what you have after the vowels is the consonants. Now, with the consonants, this is also where there's a difference between the Continental and the Roman. So in the Continental, you see the C and the G being allowed to be soft in some cases. So you can, instead of having the K for the C, you can sometimes have the S sound for the C, and the G can be the J sound instead of the G, hard G sound, and so Continental will allow you to do those soft C's and G's. Roman's not going to let you do that. The J, being Y as in yet, is going to be the same with the Roman. So the real big difference between Roman and Continental are the C and the G. But also we'll find that the V is going to be pronounced differently as well. So looking at this a little more closely, you have the S is always as in this. And you say, well, when would it not be that? Well, there is no SH combination that has a sh sound to it within the Latin. The Q and the U is the qu as in quit. And that's pretty well common sense. It's not going to be a whole lot different. The C always being hard as in cat. This one is a little bit harder to get used to pronouncing, because we are going to be so tempted as English speakers to have the soft C in certain words, as the one we see here below. And then the J is always the Y, as in yet. So the word here at the bottom is yakio, not jasio. And what's important to grasp with the J and the being like a Y is that really the J is an I. In fact, in some older, well, it just depends on what text it is of Latin. For instance, you'll get to the name of Jesus, and it's not going to be J starting with a J. It's going to be starting with an I, Iesu. And so the I and the J are pretty much almost the same letter. In fact, there wasn't a J originally, and so just kind of remember that and get ready to see the J and the I switching places without too much problem. You're going to see that in the endings of some of the pronouns and such, where those are going to be easily and quickly exchanging places. Now, the next thing that we have then, the next column, you have G as in gun, always hard as in gun, not the J sound at all. X always is in extra, not with a harder C sound. And then T always as in tin. Again, there's not a TH where it's going to become a th sound without the hard stop of the air. And then the V is always going to be like a W in well. Now, if you've ever noticed, a W actually looks like a double V, not a double U, and that's because the U and the V are actually the same letter. So the U and the V, well, I'll just put it, there wasn't a U until about the 1500s that it started to be used, and this is why you'll find some older inscriptions where you're expecting a U and you see the actual V in the Latin. It was just the W sound, which is like the W. And so you see here with the fugitivus, it's not fugitivus, it's fugitivus. So you have that W sound. The fun one with this, speaking of talking like Caesar, is when you understand how it's pronounced, you look at his famous saying of, I came, I saw, I conquered, which is vini, vidi, vici, and it's actually weenie, weedy, wiki. Yeah, see, it's not maybe that cool to talk like Caesar. I don't know. I see the little Caesar in Night in the Museum saying weenie weedy wiki. I mean, that makes sense, but the big bold Caesar, like weenie weedy wiki. It's like, yeah, no, you get the idea. It's always a W, and you have that's fugitivus. It's going to take a while to get used to saying it that way all the time, but the V is especially one when it comes to verbs and how the verbs are going to form and changes within the verb stems for the perfect stem, that when you pronounce the V correctly and you understand that the V and the U are the same letter, you're going to understand some of the conjugation forms a little bit better. When we get to verbs, you'll get that a little bit more in detail at that time. Now, next then what we have with this last column is you have the S and the U, always as in suave. The R is always as in race, so those two aren't that hard. The Z here is always like DZ in ads. Now, this isn't saying a D and a Z separately. It's not ads. It's trying to get your tongue in the same position for the Z and the D at the same time to correctly pronounce this letter. It's when it's in cases like this where accents come out because you can't quite get the sound of the native consonant out the way that it actually would sound, so people can tell that you're not quite getting it right. But the Z then is not just a Z sound; it's a Z Z Z. So there's like a put your tongue against your teeth like a D and a Z at the same time, and do that, and that's the correct way that they would have pronounced the Z. You also see here the last one. It's BS and BT is pronounced more like a PS and a PT. And so this is just kind of, the P and the B are actually very, very close to each other in how they're pronounced. In fact, the subtlety of it is actually kind of surprising sometimes when you stop and realize we can tell the difference between a P and a B because they are pronounced very similarly. Now, that being said, what I want you guys to see here is something about pronunciation. So let's look at what this says here about forming consonants. Consonants, basically vowels are those letters where air passes through and we shape it, the sound with our vocal cords. And so it's like a, e. If you're saying those, you'll find that it's your vocal cords distinguishing the sound, and the air is just passing through your mouth and your nose and giving a nice resonance with that. Now, with consonants, it's a little bit different. With consonants, consonants are formed when our mouth shapes that sound. And different parts of our mouth are used to shape different consonants. So what you see here, for instance, is there are the labial letters, which are formed with our lips, which are B, F, M, P, V, and W. Now, these, if you noticed, if you pronounce these, B, it's with the two lips. F, it's your teeth up against your lips. M, it's the two lips kind of coming together and creating a buzz. P, your two lips like the B are coming together and stopping the air and letting it out. In fact, the P and the B is why I have to have this goofy circle in front of my microphone, because they create such a pop of air when it comes out. And then the V and the W. The V is the teeth against the lips like the F, and the W is just the shaping of the lips of the W sound. So those are labials. Dentals, the D, you're putting your tongue is the tip of your tongue against the back of your teeth. D, the English way of saying J is there up there with that. L, la, N, S, T, Y, and Z. These are all up at that front of the mouth with the tongue against the back of the teeth. And the D and the Z, you'll notice, are very close to each other, except the D totally stops things, the Z is letting things through. And so the combination of those two for the pronunciation of Z makes some sense there. Then there are the gutturals, or the palatals, that are formed in the back of the mouth. G is for the G, is at the back. H, that's in the back of your throat. K, Q, R. R is kind of interesting because it's in the back of the throat, but you're also using your tongue to shape it, which is why it is harder for some to be able to say that if you're speaking coming from a foreign language background. And then you have the X. X is at the back of your throat as well. Now, what's interesting then about this is that these letters, because they're formed at the same place at the back of the mouth, you will find that word forms will switch. So like just when we went through the video prior about the stem and we talked about decide, and you had the stem ends with a D, but then it went from decide to decision. The D switched to an S. That D switched to an S because they're formed in the same part of the mouth, but one is letting air through, one is stopping the air, and it just kind of melded the two sounds because it didn't want to produce either, if there are two sounds originally, two consonants next to each other that were harder to put together, so it just blended them, which may be the case here with our word lex legis. So if the stem is leg, but if the originally it was legsi or legs, instead of saying legs, it's lex, and it just combined those two sounds together to become a different letter. Now, this is important because if you are translating and you're going through and you are looking up the word and it says, legis, and you go to look up legis, you're fine because L-E-G, you look up, oh, wait, it's not L-E-G. You're not going to find it under L-E-G. You're thinking legis, why can't I find this word in the dictionary? It's because it's under L-E-X. and it gets frustrating when you're doing translation work of trying to find these and you're not used to knowing when these letters are switching up on you. Well, it is a little help, not a ton, but it's a little bit of a help to realize that when the G becomes a different letter, it's going to become one of the letters that is in this guttural group, because that's where the G is formed. So the G went from a G to an X because it's formed at the back of the mouth. Same thing with a mito in the third conjugation. Verbs, mito, the stem becomes misi. The T switches to an S. T and S are formed at the same part of the mouth. So if you go and you're trying to find misi somewhere in the dictionary and you can't find it because it's under mito, you can at least narrow down where it is in the dictionary by realizing it's going to be M-I and then whatever letter is formed in the same part of the mouth. So that is my video on pronunciation. Hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it too much. I must be a real nerd. But I love thinking about the different parts of the language and how it's actually pronounced. Even though I probably have said pronunciation so many different ways in this video, it's not funny. But like the video down below because we like it when you like it. And also remember to check out the chart book that goes along with these videos. Have a good time. See you next video.